So prompt, and we'll be live very, very shortly with the Empower Hour Show, episode 77. Can't believe it. Live in a few seconds. So prompt, and there we have it. Thank you very much, everybody, for being patient and arriving on time. Here we go. Well, welcome, everybody. A little bit earlier. Thank you very much for being on time as well, Rehmat. Welcome, everybody, to the Empower Hour show on Salam Radio, our core sponsors, along with my own YouTube channel, which is Sukhi Wahiwala official channel, and the Inspired Tribe. This evening, myself, your host, Sukhi Wahiwala, I will be interviewing somebody really special. Now, I'm going to introduce her in just a second. I'm just going to go through some housekeepings, if I may. This is episode 77 of the Empower Hour series. I can't believe it's been going for such a long time, 77 weeks to be precise. Very proud of that journey. And this evening, we're not going to let you down in any way. Our tremendously amazing and interesting and empowering, inspiring guest today is Rehmat Rayatt. She is the individual who has won multi-awards on many platforms across the continents. Today, we're going to be interviewing her for her own personal journey. As you know, the Empower Hour show is specifically designed to augment the journey that each one of these individuals that you see as successful people in the public eye, the journey that they actually took and how humbly true and honest they really are, and the adversity that they had to overcome to get where they are today in this life. So she has recently been very well received across the globe by Amazon Prime with going live, and I want to congratulate her in a moment, with going live with the documentary called Toxification, which focuses very, very clearly on the farmer's plight. The irony is this actual documentary was started in 2014 and finished in 2019 after 5 years worth of editing. And just look at the current plight, rightly so, and I want to make it very, very proudly open and honest that Sukhi Wahiwala supports the farmer's plight in India, in specific. If you're joining in from around the globe, we're talking about that today. And the Toxification documentary has reignited itself and gone live on Prime only last week, has had a tremendous rating system. Please go and watch it whenever you've listened to this particular interview and go and support the movement. She has covered tremendously heart-wrenching content to talk specifically about the actual suicide ratio and rates and the lack of support in Punjab, India. Without any further ado, I want to introduce Rehmat. Welcome, Rehmat.
Thank you so much. I'm extremely honored to be here and to be speaking with you, and I'm so glad that our paths have crossed.
Thank you very much. And to be honest with yourself, it's our honor, because when somebody creates something with such gravitas on the planet as you already have in such a tender age, it's our honor, humbly, to have you on the show. Without further ado, I'd like to jump into our first few questions. As you know, we go straight into it. We hold nothing back, Rehmat, so that's not for you to get on edge by any chance, but we're not going to let you go. The first question I'd love to bring to attention for everybody who's watching, and our audience comes from every particular continent on the planet, and we're so proud from people from Fiji all the way through to Brazil and places of that sort of nature, and logically Europe, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, China even, would you believe, and obviously the Africas. I'd like to ask you a simple question. What was your journey like? I mean, were you, your family, your parents, where were you born? That'd be wonderful to sort of touch base on that. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm born in Essex, in I call it deep Essex, so like far away from London, so near Stansted Airport. And I am one of two, so I have an older brother. Mm-hmm. And I think what was most poignant about our childhood and our kind of early years, and what shaped us the most, is the fact that my parents were really, really supportive of us growing creatively. So I actually remember my mum saying to me later on, like after I had kind of graduated and things, we were having a chat, and she said, I would have been really disappointed if you'd become a doctor. And I was so shocked by that, because obviously it's in our community, in the Indian community, it's often the opposite way round. You know, it might be quite embarrassing to be the parent of a creative person or something like that. But my upbringing was completely the opposite. And it was really ingrained in us to follow our passion.
That is just tremendous. I mean, really, honestly, we know it's the dreaded doctor, accountant, legal bod, or somebody who's an engineer. Now, I know you've got engineering in the family as well. We'll touch base on that a bit later. But with no disrespect to any of those careers and qualifications, because we're very much in need of all of them. But it's kind of like a set standard, and that's just wonderful to see that you had such a diversity within your family. So the question I ask yourself is, why do you think you were supported in creative arts, for example?
So creativity has always been a big part of our family. My maternal grandfather was both a photographer and a musician. He played the tabla, which is traditional Indian drums, essentially.
Yeah.
And so he had kind of put the arts on a pedestal and made it known that they were really important. And obviously that trickled down through his children. And my dad actually met my mum through being my grandfather's tabla student.
Wow.
Yeah, and so music kind of weaved its way through our family. So my brother is now a full-time musician. He plays the tabla. And obviously I'm a full-time photographer, filmmaker, facilitator. So we've kind of, both of the grandchildren have kind of taken the roots of my grandfather, I think, and we're weaving our own journeys now.
How lovely is that? So you've actually got what we call 3 generations passed on, with being a tabla, or in English you would pronounce it tabla, but the tabla musicians and professionals in each. So it's a grandfather, a sort of, in essence, a son-in-law, and a grandson. How amazing. And your grandfather being a photographer as well, which was very, very rare for an early generational individual. So as a professional photographer and a musician. So he already followed the arts anyway, didn't he?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think being migrants, it was kind of a journey of I just feel so fortunate that they kind of made those journeys and they made those sacrifices. So my father is not a full-time musician, and my grandfather was not a full-time musician or photographer. He was actually a science teacher. And
Wow.
so, yeah, and so I feel really privileged that they have taken that journey in order to enable myself and my brother to be able to follow our passions.
That is tremendous. That's just so lovely. So I'm going to lean a little bit further into another conversation. Because obviously we'll touch base with reference to toxicology, toxification, sorry, a little bit later in the interview. But for now, can I just pry a little bit more and share a little bit more about your earlier journeys? I mean, what was school like, and how was that journey?
Yeah, school was quite difficult. So as I mentioned, I grew up in kind of deep Essex. So it was a very like predominantly white area. So I remember in my, like I went to a really big high school, and yet there was just myself and one, like I had a fellow black student, and we were the only 2 who were not white in the whole school. And so, yeah, it was really challenging because I faced a lot of racial bullying. And so I think I spent those 5 years in school just being essentially very scared. So I remember, there would be children kind of following me around with scissors, threatening to cut my hair. And obviously I've never cut my hair as a Sikh. It's very important to us that we keep our hair. And so having children running after me with scissors, and always I always felt like I was looking behind me and, trying to kind of make sure I was safe. And then even outside of school, somehow the bullies kind of found out where I lived, and every Friday night our house would get egged, and that was like yeah, it became such a normal thing that I remember the Saturday morning ritual of my mum was to wash the egg off our conservatory, and that was like a normal Saturday morning thing. She'd be there with her broom, and you know, for that to become normal, I think I held a lot of shame and resentment because I knew that it was kind of my fault. And obviously, as soon as I left the high school, the egging stopped.
So I'm just going to interject there a little bit if I can. Firstly, if any of our audience, because we have such a young audience following us, have experienced or are experiencing any kind of bullying or even at workplace bullying, it's not okay. You know, there's nothing wrong with you as an individual. What we would say very, very strongly with Salam Radio and the whole of the team and myself, Sukhi, is that you must do something about it. Staying quiet is not the answer. It doesn't go away, it just gets bigger. And I would really seriously suggest that you step up and speak to a teacher, a headmaster, a work colleague, or somebody else in the HR department if you're at work, because it's not okay. And the reality is that a lot of individuals have this inner resentment that you don't want to escalate to get bigger. That's not the truth. It doesn't happen to get bigger. It does get resolved. Sometimes it just takes a little bit of attention. So please do step out, speak to all the relevant people, and don't stay silent. I just want to dive a little bit, if I can. That's heart-wrenching to hear, Rehmat, that you've faced such kind of challenges in life and such ostracization, racial contention, and how you were kind of forced to kind of take it in your stride. But I heard something in there, if I may share, that you had the feelings that you were to blame. Because I assume that was because of the fact that it was people from your school possibly, and it was against you as a person. So effectively, you know, targeting the home and the house. I was thankful that you didn't say it didn't get escalated to any kind of immediate violence around the house, so that the house still became the safe space. But you're clear now, obviously, that was not your fault. So how did you manage to clear that tension in your mind?
I think that's where my creative journey actually began. So I've always, as I said, it's always been really important for us to be creative, and that was always encouraged. And so I found photography. I remember picking up my dad's camera, which obviously my grandfather had advised him to buy. So I remember picking up his camera and just really flowing with it. And that's where my journey began. And so I ended up studying photography at university. I did a degree in fine art photography. And what was amazing about that was that we were encouraged to just explore, and especially to fail. Like, just, it was really encouraged to fail. And when we did fail, it was kind of like, well done, because you've pushed yourself out of your comfort zone.
Wow.
Can
I just that encouragement, sorry to disturb you there, but where did that encouragement come from? From home or from school?
So it was really at university that we were encouraged to fail. That was that was a really surprising part of my degree, because that's not what I thought I was going to learn. But I actually learned a lot about just exploration and more about who I was and what I wanted to say to the world. I think that was the point of kind of forcing us to fail and forcing us to our edge in order to create something really beautiful on the other side. So during my degree, I began studying my culture in different ways. So my dissertation was on Orientalism and post-colonial theory. And through my kind of creative work, I began exploring, unpicking, and kind of understanding where I came from. And it was unpacking that shame, really, that I had felt about my skin color and, you know, things like that. Unpacking it, understanding it, and finding my place within it, and finding a place where it was safe to be who I was. And so I remember I created, so during this film degree, what was really amazing was that our lecturers, you know, they were really, really open with what we created. So I started making films during this photography degree.
Okay.
And I made a film about my dad tying his turban. It was a very kind of art house, silent film. And it was just him tying his turban, but it was filmed really kind of poetically. And that was really important for me as a bit of a turning point, because I felt safe I felt safe creating that work. I felt safe showing that work and saying, this is who I am, this is my dad. You know, this is the guy who he used to go into town and people would call him the Turbinator, and all sorts of things. He would experience kind of some racial abuse as well because of the school that I was at and because people knew he was my dad. And there I was saying, actually, this is my dad, and I'm actually proud to be part of this rich culture.
I just feel that that is such a powerful statement for the world to listen to today, in this interview, where the actual identity of self, for example, the shame, because it takes a real deep dive to be able to, even to this day. I mean, I tie a turban as well. This is a patka, which is just the cup of my hair, but I tie a turban, and even to this day, I still find not a shame around it, but a security, a safeguarding around tying my turban, which is very sacred to myself as an Amritdhari Sikh, as a baptized Sikh. But actually being able to proudly represent that part of our religious culture and pride in a short video, I think that video within itself must have been really, really well received. And even to this day, if you put that out into the marketplace today, I think it'll be so well received. A really, really proud moment. That I thought that's great. I mean, please continue.
Yeah, I actually I had a call from one of my old lecturers yesterday, and he said, I remember your turban project. It was amazing. It was really groundbreaking. So yeah, it's nice. And actually, interestingly, we had another conversation, and I said to him, well, I graduated 9 years ago. Has the demographic of students studying photography changed? So I went to an arts university, and again, I was the only, I think there was one other Indian in the entire university. And I asked him if the demographic had changed, and he said no. And I was really surprised by that.
Wow. So this is over what? You're saying maybe 15 years ago? 10 to 15 years ago? You're talking about the demographic hasn't shifted and changes in the UK?
Yeah, I mean, this lecturer actually said that he had started lecturing in '94, and he could count the number of non-white people who had studied with him on two hands, so less than 10.
So that says a lot about I suppose the Asian community, or even the ethnic community, for full stop, where creative arts per se, exactly what you're saying, is not promoted. And you are living evidence that is, if we don't have enough creative art individuals, how will we get a story, a narrative across to the world of the real British, Asians that you are, and the global Asians, as you've made a video. One of your biggest videos right now, Toxification, is actually nothing to do with being in England. It's actually to do with India, and we'll touch about that in a mo. Last week, I had my guest was Bittu Singh, and he also wants to move into that creative arts arena. And he had the same feeling. He said that the next generation just is not connecting with anything that's non-academic only, like mathematical academics. Sorry, please continue. So the question I would ask yourself is that, if we talk a little bit about what we call a life-defining moment, something that within your life that sort of like switches on when this is real and this is it, we have our mark to be made on this planet, on this life as we're journeying. Please, would you like to share? Have you got any life-defining moments that's come to mind?
Yeah, I think at the time it didn't feel like a life-defining moment, but looking back, there was definitely something there. So it was about exploring my culture through creativity. And there was a moment, so this is moving on to Toxification. There was a moment when I read a newspaper article about farmer suicide. This is back in early 2014. And it wasn't as well publicized then as it is now. So there were not many articles on it, but I read this article, and I kind of thought to myself, wouldn't it be amazing if I could go there and make a film about it and bring it back to people in the UK who can become more educated on the situation. And then I kind of forgot about it. And then I was planning a 6-month backpacking trip around Asia. I love to travel. And so while we were planning that, I've got a colleague who I studied with. So this is Leva Questani, and she became my co-director with Toxification.
Oh, so two of you, I got it.
Yeah, so we were both backpacking at the time, and we said, why don't we meet in India? And she said, well, why don't we make a film together? We're both filmmakers. And I said, well, let's make this film about farmer suicide. And then it became a little bit more real. And, you know, there's kind of this journey to realizing a project, which is hugely personal. And at first it feels like your little baby. And then obviously it grows and grows. And at some point you kind of let it loose, and it becomes much bigger than you. So that was the journey. And I think that was the defining moment. Firstly, realizing my potential, and secondly, understanding the process of trusting in the universe or God or whatever you call it, to kind of carry you through.
That is so powerful, Rehmat. What I'm trying to get clear here is just so the audience this evening, and I'm sure you're absolutely thrilled by this kind of lovely journey with female empowerment as well, and stepping up into your light and sharing, which we're going to cover a little bit later. But the principle, the sheer principle of finding an idea, being touched by it, and kind of like making a statement to say, I wish I could expose this with a video and bring it to the rest of the world, and then putting it out there, in essence, you know, putting it into your future timeline, and then letting it go and trusting in the divine universal entity or an energy, God per se. There is testament there that this is actually, you know, your truth, isn't it? That's a beautiful thing. One question that just arises, we're going to touch on toxification in a moment, but just before we move there, is it possible just to ask a simple question? Because what really sort of like stuck out there is the fact that you went backpacking. Now, I assume at a tender age of, let's say, mid-20s or something of that sort of nature, backpacking is not the norm for an Asian family girl, you know, just like a young lady saying, hey, I'm going to go backpacking. And there's plenty of individuals who do that, but there's a lot of other people who do not. My own daughter, Hajot, went and spent a month in South Africa, in various countries, supporting charitable trust. And so we were very proud that she wanted to spend a month out there and actually help. So it's a very similar sort of energy, just to give them the character to stand on their own feet. But what was it like in your life? I mean, how did you get this bug for travel? I mean, this confidence to travel backpack stuff?
I'm very, very lucky that I've always kind of been lucky to see the world. So my dad has always worked in Italy since I was little. He manages a team there, and so he has always flown back and forth.
Yeah, sorry, what does he do? What does he do? He works in Italy.
Yeah, he's an engineer. He works for Fiat.
Oh, right. Good. Oh, man.
Yeah, so every kind of half term, every holiday, we would either go and visit him in Italy, or he would be traveling somewhere else, and we'd be kind of very lucky that we'd be allowed and able to travel, kind of tag along with him. And so I've been on incredible business trips with him. So we've traveled all over Italy, Japan, Tokyo was amazing. We've done lots of trips to India. So yeah, I'm really lucky, and I think that's where I've kind of, like, my first trip away, I was 6 months old. So I've always had that travel bug, for sure.
Yeah. Right, yeah. You're on your jet setting, enjoying the world. And I suppose it's a theory that I shared with another brilliant guest as well, that gave them a sense of freedom as well. Escapism, freedom from the current norm, you know, being up facing some hardships, etc.
Yeah, I think there is that. Also, what really intrigues me even now about traveling, the way that I travel, so backpacking. There's holidaying, which is lovely, and I love to do it, staying in hotels, all of that kind of stuff. And then there's long-term backpacking, and they're very different things. And what I've found with backpacking is that it's a very transient lifestyle. So I can decide that I'm going to be in Asia for 6 months, but obviously I'm going to travel around. I'm not going to stay in one place for very long. And all of the travelers that you meet are doing the same thing. But what's interesting is that you become so close in such a short space of time, because like I was staying in dorms and things, and so there's like 8 people in a dorm and you become best friends. You're literally spending 24 hours together, and then 3 days later you part ways and you never see each other again. And I just find that so difficult and such an interesting thing to kind of put yourself in that position over and over again. And it's pushed my boundaries, and my definitely got me out of my comfort zone, because I'm very much a homebody and I like to be in the same place. And so being in that environment and having to be okay with it, because every 3 days you're saying goodbye to someone who you thought was your best friend, is actually a really powerful position to put yourself in.
And did you find with those kind of, I call them flash meetings, in essence, 3 days of intense buddying per se, making best friends and communicating and finding so many aligned crosses, etc. Did you find that it gets easier as you go along, or is it still as hard now? And I'm going to ask a real deep question: do you find it harder when you're out backpacking to be a bit more open? Like, I'm sure the very first few times that these people are going to be my best friends, buddies forever, and then breaking that journey. And the question I'm asking is, do you make such a deep friendship so quickly and so intensely still if you traveled, or have you kind of changed that model and become a little bit more reticent and self contained?
I think it's been the opposite, actually. I think traveling has enabled me and supported me to do a lot of healing work. So because my kind of young memories of other children and other people were kind of less than supportive, and because of all the bullying and all of that kind of thing, I have found it quite difficult to trust people. And so traveling has put me in a place where I've actually embraced that. And that's why I think it holds such an important place in my heart, because it's actually been part of my healing journey, and it's opened me up to connections. And my work now is all about connection. That's kind of the basis of all of my work.
That one last line there you just said really translates in your videography of Toxification, and that really has hit a bell for myself, and I'm hoping for everybody else who's listening, that I suppose there's a skill that allows you to go deep dive, intense, and cut. Wow, that's really, really great. The way you've actually identified and translated that into your what we call the narrative that you've created within Toxification and many other videos as well. That's wonderful. That's really deep. That's given me goosebumps. It's thinking about that intensity that you can create in such short periods of time, because I can remember watching Toxification on launch day last week, and I did a big push out to everybody else, and we were so glad that we get you in such short notice, because I know you're very well sought out at the moment with the support of the Farmers Plight in Delhi. The videography and the principle of it all was mind-blowing. It really left me in a space where what you wanted to create, I can remember having a fleeting conversation with somebody, just getting them to get up and say, right, that's enough. I've got to do something about this. That was definitely evident within me. And I implore everybody to watch Toxification on Amazon Prime, in the UK currently, but it'll be around the globe. I'm sure you can watch it as well. But before we go into Toxification's actual makeup, did you find that same tug within the families that you touched as the farmers?
So just to mention, it's on Amazon Prime in the UK and USA at the moment. And yeah, so in terms of the families, it's really interesting. My Punjabi is like very, very bad. I don't really speak Punjabi, and I find it quite difficult to understand it. And so I think that was a bit of a support blanket actually while filming, because although I could understand the gist of what they were saying, I didn't have a deep enough knowledge of the language to really get a full deep understanding in the way that yeah, in the way that I would with English. So I think that kind of protected me. But it was when we sat down to translate, I sat with a translator for a couple of weeks, and we were both bawling our eyes out, hearing what these farmers and their families were saying. There were points when the translator would literally stop and be like, I don't know how to translate this, because and he would just be, it was just such an emotional such an emotional time.
I can truly understand that. There's a reason for this, because logically, within editing, you edit out an awful lot. And what's left in there is so powerful and so impactful and so well narrated, not verbally, as a narrative, a piece of work itself. I can only imagine what you had to take out and how intense that would have been as well. We're going to go a little bit detail in a second, but just before, if anybody's just joined us, we have already, I told you, Rehmat, that will be so quick. We've already been online for half an hour. So how amazing is that? We are with episode 77 and the Empower Hour show on Salam Radio and YouTube, Sukhi Wahiwala official channel. And we are today with Rehmat Rayatt, who is the videographer, the filmer, the creator, is what I'd like to say, of the world-renowned and accepted documentary on the farmers' plight, in suicide in specific, on the Toxification on channel in Amazon. So if you've just joined us, please, please, please scrub back and listen to some amazing evidences of how the intensity in this particular narrative style that Rehmat actually delivers with her partner, that how they've been encouraged with this deep dive and connected the backpacking intensities with this particular type of narrative and telling a story, and how supportive the family was as well. So please do scrub back and join in, and please stay with us. This is episode 77. As we have already said, Rehmat, back to yourself, if I may. So can we get a little bit closer with some of the conversations that you had with Toxification and what they really meant to you? Because I can remember there was a university, a gentleman who was starting a college, sorry, I do apologize, a college within like 110 villages. And there was nobody there delivering this. And they've delivered such a brilliant concept of helping people to study, but also I'm talking about the children of the families that have been affected, and also supporting the family at the same time by paying them physically and feeding the children as well. Is that right? Please do help us understand.
Yeah, so there are a number of people doing really amazing work there. I don't want to talk too much about it because I would love for people to watch the film. I think I try and stay away from telling their stories because it's much more empowering to hear it from their mouths. So I like to try and give them that space.
I like that. A good emotional aikido. I like that one. A quick deflect. But because it's a movie and because it's a documentary and it needs a great support, I will really encourage people to watch that particular video. The documentary is life-changing, is what I say. So just a second to yourself, if you don't mind. These sort of environments. I mean, you've traveled. You went. I think you said you went to North India. You went to Nepal or something like that when you were travel backpack. So at what point did this become a reality for you to travel to the Punjab after reading that article?
So we had planned Toxification for a number of months. So in the beginning of 2014, I stumbled across the article. Mm-hmm. Then we began our kind of like meetings and pre-production for Toxification. So it wasn't, although it kind of, looking back, it feels like it was on a whim. Actually, we had done a lot of planning. We'd spent a few months planning, finding people on the ground who could support us and all of that kind of thing. And then Toxification was filmed in October of 2014. Mm-hmm. And we were incredibly lucky in many ways. I always say that the story just fell into our laps because it really, really felt like that. I mean, for one thing, so when we went in October 2014 to film Toxification, there had been, so all of the farmers were thrashing rice. It was the harvest time. And they were thrashing rice by hand. So you essentially grab kind of like a handful of rice and you thrash it on an oil drum. And we were saying, oh, this is so beautiful, this is so stunning, what lovely stuff to film. And we did lots of filming of that. And it wasn't until later on we spoke to one of the farmers, and he said, this is an absolute tragedy. And we were like, why is it a tragedy? And he said, well, the reason why we're having to do this by hand is because it essentially had rained once 1 week too late. So there was one rainfall 1 week too late, which meant that the ground was too soft to use combine harvesters.
Oh my goodness.
And we were so shocked. I mean, that just illustrates how they are so reliant on nature, and you can't predict what's going to happen.
And that means that they're still being very manual. It's tedious and grueling on their body, I assume. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, these were families who just had to make it work. So I'm sure some of them had to employ laborers. I'm sure some of them had to, ask every family member, they probably had to ask their children to, come out of school for a few days or weeks, or I don't know how long. But I mean, these fields are huge. I mean, imagine just thrashing this much rice,
Yeah, that's right. Honestly, I'm not telling you again. This is no plug. This is a genuine journey of how Rehmat's journey has been. The cinematography quality, and also the heart wrench. I said to that deep dive. You really get to know these individuals. You can feel where their journey's been, and including all of the heroes of that particular, the actual documentary itself as well. Rehmat, I just want to touch a little bit on this as well. So you, in the past, have shared that this kind of took you like a 5-year plight, really, of sharing, and it was by no means aligned for the current travesty that's happening again in India, specifically with the Farmers Bill. So it was launched 2019. So I remember being invited circa, I think it was September, October, and I couldn't make it for some various reasons. But from October 2019 to 2014, there's a 5-year gap. So what went on?
Yeah, it's been a long journey. So initially, when Leva and I were planning this film, it was to be a 5-minute short film.
Wow, what a change.
Yeah, and even for 5-minute short films, there's so much research and planning that goes into it. And so that had been the plan. And when we got to Punjab, obviously we had done a lot of research. I had actually, this is an interesting story. So I, without any Punjabi knowledge, I was like, and none of my family live in Punjab. So all of my family came via Kenya for like 3 generations. So there's no one in India now. And I was like, and Leva had said to me, well, you're Punjabi, so why don't you go and contact some farmers? And I had said, yes, that seems logical. I will do that. And then I kind of like put the phone down, and I was like, oh, what do I do? And so I did the only thing I knew, which was to go onto Facebook. And I literally searched on Facebook, Farmers of Punjab, and this group came up. And everything in the group, it was all written in Punjabi. And I thought, I can't do that, so I'll just write in English. So I just wrote in English, my name's Rehmat, I'm a filmmaker, and I'm hoping to make this film. Can anyone help me? Then I kind of just put it away and thought probably no one's going to reply. And literally a few seconds later, I got a call from an Indian number, and it was this gentleman. He was a farmer. And he said, thank you so much for making this film. Come and stay with me. I will sort out everything you need.
Wow.
And, yeah.
How heart open, had such an open heart there.
Yeah, I mean, the whole project flowed like that. And so
it's like a divine flow, a divine intervention, just literally making the doors happen, isn't it?
Yeah. So we had this contact, and so we went and stayed with him. And then the following day
Beg your pardon, was that person somebody actually in the movie, in the film as well, the documentary?
No, so
somebody who literally helped you produce, communicate and connect, but wasn't actually even a part of the actual film, right?
No, we actually we begged him to be named as our producer, because that's essentially what he was. But he said, I really don't want to be named. So he's a wonderful, wonderful man. And so the day after we arrived, he had already arranged for every farmer in the entire area to come to his house so that we could meet them. And that was kind of that that really sums up how our journey was with this film, because everything we needed literally fell into our laps. There was another point where we were looking for a certain farmer, which I won't talk too much about, but we were really searching for him. And we couldn't find a contact for him. We didn't know where to find him. And Lever mentioned it to one of the family members of the family that we were staying at. And he said, oh, yeah, I'll just drop you there tomorrow. And the next day we were in Anandpur Sahib at this farmer's house.
Wow.
So
Wow. That is honestly, that is such a divine conversation. I think it's so beautiful to hear, and to show what we call in Punjabi, we would say shraddha. Shraddha means the inner contentment and sheer will to help somebody, the intention behind it. So that's really, really wonderful. And I think you have embodied the fact that if you start with a clear and beautiful intention to help and change the world, that the world starts, the universe sort of like has that plan for you. It's wonderful to hear. Thank you. Please do continue. If you've got anything more to tell us about how the making of it happened. I mean, over that 5-year period, there also was editing to do, there was cutting to do, there was many, many things. Did you find it very hard to get that narrative flowing?
yeah, it was very challenging. Firstly, Lever and I had never worked on a feature film before, and we didn't even plan to make a feature film. So it was all very, it was very scary. And I think I'm very, very glad that it happened that way, because if someone had told me that I would go to Punjab to make a feature film, I would have said, no way, like I don't have the skills yet. I don't have the knowledge yet. I'm not good enough to take on such a mammoth task. I mean, people who make feature films in the film industry, like they're not 22. Yeah. So yeah, I'm really glad that it happened that way. But it's been a really long and challenging journey for sure. So the entire project has been kind of self-funded, and we've kind of got bits of sponsorship from here and there, which we're really, really lucky to have had, but it's been largely kind of voluntary work in a voluntary capacity. And the editing process was really, really long, because we didn't know how to cut together a feature film, essentially. And so we did what we had been taught to do, which is the very traditional way of essentially typing up every single word that everyone says. So we had like reams and reams. We had like 200 pages of just like interviews, and then we literally physically cut them up and rearrange them into a film. So that's
a mammoth task.
Yeah, I mean, that's how we started, and then we began refining. And at that time I was living it was like a warehouse, so there were 16 other people living in this warehouse. It was a bit of a crazy time. And every evening we would invite those 16 people and all of their friends to come and have a showing of Toxification. So they would come and watch the film, and then they would give us feedback. And then the next morning we would go back into the edit. We'd spend the entire day editing, and then that evening we'd have a screening. And we did that for like 6 weeks straight. And so there have been so many different processes. And then there was the process of producing it and getting it into cinemas, and then the process of getting it, onto Amazon Prime. It's been a really long journey, and I think I've learnt so much through this journey. I'm really excited to move forward with this knowledge now.
Well, I've got to tell you now, honestly, to be truthful to yourself, it's a masterpiece. It really is. It just has an emotive narrative that just takes you somewhere. It takes a journey. I had to stop. I had to rewind. I had to keep moving forward with it. At no point did I feel as though it didn't seam together. So a complete, tremendously genius work. And it's part of the reason why I'm so drawn to having you on my show today, because of that particular reason. It's just so well. I mean, there's no disrespect to anybody else's videos. I've seen many documentaries, and you feel they're a little bit disjointed. You don't go quite deep enough, or they don't quite get the emotion, the cinematography, the images, and that's all I'm going to say. You must watch this, audience, if you're watching. There's something that I heard there with reference to a correlation, something you said a bit earlier, Rehmat, with reference to the college encouragement, so the university encouragement to fail and reflect upon the failure. We call this, in my Synagogue methodology that I share and train, called the CUC learning loop, which basically is conscious, unconscious consciousness learning loop, which means you consciously take the action, you unconsciously align the action, get the stuff done, getting it done, and then you reflect back upon it consciously again, say, what did I actually learn? And that principle that you've just shared there, it kind of shows how hard that period of your life was and how it showed up in your world when you actually went to do your first feature documentary per se, or film, because you didn't know how to do any of it. And you said, well, if you'd asked the question, you wouldn't have stepped that step, which is tremendously empowering for everybody listening today. And the fact that you did, and you just stumbled along and made it happen. And so a question I've got to ask yourself is that, are there any words, because I see you as somebody who's been seen in this world as somebody who's well, you're soon to become very well known, even more so than you have before. Your generation has played a tremendous part in becoming the mascots, the people they could look up to, the people who you could refer to and say, it's possible. As you said earlier on, you're a person of color, and you felt that you couldn't do certain things in certain areas. Have you got any words to say about how you feel as being a point of reference for people, an inspiration?
Yeah, I think part of the reason why I do the work I do is because growing up, I suppose I had one role model who looked like me, and that was my mum. But other than my mum, there was no one else. There was no one on TV who looked like me. There was, there's even now there's like huge. We do live in a patriarchal world, and that can be quite challenging for young girls who want to be something, but they don't see women in powerful places, in powerful positions. And add on to that being a woman of color, and that's kind of like an added level of challenge. So part of the reason why I do what I do is because it's really important to me that there are young girls who are able to see people who look like them doing amazing things in different areas. So it's not just about becoming a doctor or a dentist or anything like that. Those are like really amazing professions, but there are also so many other ways that we can help and support other people and share our views and make the world a better place, essentially.
I truly agree with that. And in specific, as you said yourself, being a minority of a minority per se, or being an unrepresented demographic per se, and actually being there and being the role model for young Asian women and young women full stop. I think that's a beautiful thing to share. I'm just so glad that you're on the show. Really have been tremendous. We've enjoyed it so far. My question to yourself is that, what are you up to today? What is your next? What's the future of where you're taking your next steps, please?
Yeah, so I've through my journey, I've learned so much. I've really learned so much, and I think the process of toxification taught me a lot about connection and how to connect with people, how to support people, and that's what I realized is my aim. It's about using my skills in order to support others through different facets of my work. So I'm a photographer and filmmaker, but I also do a lot of work with emotional well-being and mental health through I teach yoga, and I also teach mindfulness and breath work and kind of creative workshops which bring everything together, everything that I kind of do together. So for me, it's really important now to bring an element of mindfulness and emotional well-being support to everything that I do moving forward. So with the next film that I make, the hope and the plan is that the current model, which is essentially parachute in, take your interview, parachute out, for me that doesn't work anymore. So it's more about, can I parachute in, but can I also offer something, because these people are potentially reliving their trauma so that I can capture it. Can I offer them something? Can I offer them a creative workshop which is going to support them in their mental health and in their emotional well-being? Can I support them to move forwards? And I think that being a documentary maker, it's really tough because you're trying to do so many things. I mean, just to make a documentary about a social issue, that's good enough. Like, that's really brilliant to be able to do that. But I'm really keen on kind of switching the lens, because it can be it can feel like a really powerful place to be to be pointing your camera at someone, and it can feel really disempowering to be on the other side of the lens. And for me, I don't want that that power difference. I don't want it to be so different. I would like to give something back so that we can be on an even plane.
That is beautiful. That's such a specific understanding the energetic values of the other person you're speaking to. The fact that they could be intimidated with the fact that they've got this camera in front, but actually also you coming in and dropping in somewhat, this is not your intention at all, but I can see where you come from with patronizing kind of you jumping in. Yes, they can make a movie about your life and then just disappear and leave them to their vices again. And I think that's very amicable and very respectful. So I can visualize and see your future, obviously doing a little bit more in the same sort of field or other fields of this sort of nature, but actually showing a solution and delivering the solution with the money at the same time. Now that would be just tremendous, being able to see the reality, the deep dive of their emotional trauma that's happening, whatever's going on, whatever challenge it is, whether you're challenging Monsanto or many other things, and then finding the solution for them in the movie, in the actual narrative, and actually delivering it as well. So I think that would be wonderful. And I'd love to be a part of that as well. But the question I'd ask yourself, if I can, is how can somebody get hold of you? If they would like to be involved in anything you'd like to do with your well-being, your Reiki work, your yoga work, and your whole aspect. And I also know, a little Dickie Bird's told me that you do a photography, sort of like an intensive 6-week as well. So if somebody wanted to get involved with yourself and learn those skills, but also translate their confidence, to support their confidence through well-being and tools and skills such as photography, how could they get hold of you?
Yeah, so I'm really excited to be launching this mindful photography 6-week online course in March. So if anyone wants to get hold of me, you can follow me on Instagram. I'm at Rehmat Photo Film. And you can also find my website, which is rehmatrayatt.com.
Please, if you don't mind, you slightly froze there. At Rehmat, that's REHMAT.
Photo Film.
Photo, yeah, PHOTO Film FILM. Perfect.
Yeah.
So at Rehmat Photo Film. It sounds a bit silly, but when you're on radio and TV and stuff, it's always good to reiterate that again. And if they reach out to yourself in some format, or even toxification.com, is that right?
Yeah.
You would be happy to talk to them about whether they want to work with you, or whether they want to help you or sponsor you or something of that sort of nature?
Yes, of course.
Wonderful. So it would be brilliant. So Rehmat, it's coming towards the end of our interview, and I can't believe it myself. It's been a buzz. I've just literally moved from the start to the end, and we've only just feel as though I've just touched a conversation with you yet. It's a time when we reflect back upon legacy. Now, of course, at such a tender age, you've created such a formidable legacy already, and may God bless you to make and tenfold, if not 100-fold, what you've already created in this world to change. This is the time when we ask our guests something very tight and very particular, but quite deep, actually. We don't sort of tend to give you much time to think about this, I'm afraid. Not putting you on the spot much, but I'm going to give you a sentence, and we call it the legacy moment. If I gave you a sentence and asked you just to finish it off, it'll be basically something along the lines of this, with reference to an epitaph, end of life. I appreciate as Sikhs, we don't necessarily get buried, but cremation, but the principle is, if you can imagine that and visualize that, if it's possible. Here lies Rehmat Rayatt, the lady who, and I'd like to finish that, please. Just give us some inspiration and understanding.
Here lies Rehmat Rayatt, the lady who supported millions to journey towards their light.
Wow. So I love it. So supported millions to journey toward their light.
Yeah, or even awoke millions to journey towards their light.
I like that as well. So Rehmat awoke millions to journey towards their light.
Yeah, I think that encompasses all of the kind of work that I do. What I'm really excited about is that now the very disparate you know, offers that I have in my world are actually moving together. So we're bringing in the mindfulness with the filmmaking process. So yeah, it's about finding your own light and kind of sharing that with the world. I really truly believe that we all have something to give back.
Bless you. And I genuinely believe that with you. And you are seriously taking a tremendous journey. And I hope our tribe and our audience today have really enjoyed the journey you've had with yourself. It's not over yet. I still have one more question. We're going to spring you a little bit more. You know, on those moments when sometimes we have those moments where we have those dark moments or down moments, and we need something just to give ourselves a pickup. We call it the wisdom moment. Yeah. So if I was to ask you, Rehmat, that have you got a wisdom quote or something that gives you a pick-me-up that really gets you back aligned with yourself? What would you suggest, and could you share your wisdom quote and why?
I think what springs to mind is, if I don't do it, no one else will. And I think that that might sound a little bit negative, but it's actually, for me, I find it really empowering that this is my skill set. This is what I have, you know, been blessed with in this life. And if I don't share that with others, then no one else can shine my light. You know, everyone has their own skill set and their own language, and you know, the things that they were put on this earth to share with others. And I've got mine, and I have to continue in that journey, otherwise it just won't be fulfilling.
That is just so blessed and such a wonderful thought and share. So I'd like to say from my bottom of my heart, you know, on behalf of Salam Radio and all of the audience tonight, the Inspired Tribe, and myself, Sukhi Wahiwala, for being our 77th guest on the Empower Hour show. It's been brilliant. And I'm telling you now, you will inspire millions further, and many, many millions more to journey towards awakening them and moving them towards their inner light as well. And such beautiful words where you're trying to find that if you don't do it, then nobody else will. That's not an arrogant move. It's more to do with the fact that you, as a human being, are entitled and are blessed with your core skills and your journey and mission. And may you continue to shine and help others to shine through their journey in this life. Thank you very much, Rehmat, for being our guest today on the Empower Show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been amazing, and you're right, it's just flown by.
That's just, doesn't it? Well, if anyone else has just tuned in, please scrub back to the start. This has been Rehmat Rayatt. She is the co-creator of Toxification.com. This is the Farmers Plight. It talks about the suicide ratio, the drugs abuse, and how badly in debt and the infrastructure that does not support, which is what the farmers today in Delhi and Punjab are basically peacefully rallying against and protesting for, is for the rights to maintain and control their own destiny, and not to be squashed out by the smaller, not to squash out the smaller farmers against the bigger conglomerates. So we are very proud to bring you this particular episode. Please support and do watch it on Amazon Prime, UK and America, soon around other countries in Europe as well. Thank you very much for tuning in today. This has been, with Rehmat, an amazing journey for myself personally. It really, really has inspired me personally as well. And I hope it's inspired yourself. This has been the Empower Hour, where we bring real, honest stories of people who have gone through adversities and created world-changing environments and deliveries. So see you next Tuesday between 7 o'clock and 8 o'clock in the evening, live on my YouTube channel, which is Sukhi Wahiwala Official. Thank you very much. Please don't forget to subscribe and like and comment to assist this channel